and we don't need to miss out on the happy moments. And that's a risk, I think, when we don't realize we have unattended grief. We risk missing out on those who are still here.
Hello, my dear. Welcome back to the Darren Well podcast. What happens when grief changes not only your heart, but also your brain, your body, and your sense of safety in the world? Well, today's guest is Sylvia Wolfer. Sylvia Wolfer helps people understand the hidden ways that loss reshapes every version of us and how we can learn how to rebuild with emotional steadiness and after an unimaginable pain. And so, again, I'm excited to welcome today's guest, Sylvia Wolfer. Sylvia Wolfer is a neuroscience-informed grief educator. She's a writer. She's a speaker. And Sylvia's got her own story. Sylvia has experienced the deaths of both of her parents, two of her brothers, and Sylvia combines all this lived experience. So she's not only talked about it, but she has also lived it. And I think that's what's most powerful about her story. So she's got the lived experience with the neuroscience and backed with neuroscience, backed with mindfulness, backed with somatic practices, which is things within our body, to ways to support navigating grief, especially sudden loss and sibling grief. Her work centers around rebuilding emotional steadiness, reconnecting people with themselves, and learning how to work with pain instead of fighting against it. So again, welcome Sylvia to the Darren Well podcast. I'm so glad for you to join us today. I'm excited for listeners to hear about ways to overcome pain and find healing by learning to listen to their body. Welcome, Sylvia.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rita, for having me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I'm so grateful for the work that you do and for your platform to be open for such conversations around grief that are so important. We really need to normalize these conversations because unfortunately we are very illiterate in our Western cultures, not just when it happens to us, also when it happens to a loved one, we completely freeze and don't know what to do. So I'm super excited about what we're going to discuss today.
Heck yeah, heck yeah. So as we get started, I would love for you to briefly share about your why. So I know you're deeply inspired by the lived experience. And so your two brothers that were deceased, as well as both of your parents. Can you share a little bit about how those sudden losses impacted your desire to help others?
Yeah, well, it was certainly through lived experience, and I never thought I would one day work in the grief space. But in a nutshell, I lost my dad suddenly of a heart attack when I was 7, and then 10 years later, my younger brother died suddenly in a road accident. So they both really suddenly disappeared, and for years, decades, I was just carrying that what I call now unattended grief without really realizing it because back then, there wasn't really any support, there wasn't any help. And then fast forwards to 2019, just before lockdown, and my older brother died also suddenly in a car crash. And it may seem stupid, but brutality of the shock was enormous because somehow I thought that I'd had my share. My dad had died, my brother had died, and I really felt like this could not happen to us again, not to the same family. And so, on top of the grief, there was a real anger because it was like a wake up call, making me realize that for all these years I had carried grief that I hadn't been looking after properly because I didn't have the tools. And I had lost so many precious moments. I could have been more mindful with my older brother. And this is really what drives my work now, that realization that if I had known what I know now, I would have enjoyed my time with him more. And that reality that, people die, but then other people die and other people die and other people die. And even though we might feel that we're functioning and we do the things that need to be done and, we show up in life for the things that are important, deep inside, there is something off. And now this is my why. This is why I do it. And when that happened, my older brother died, and then lockdown happened, and it was I was alone, and I was very lonely. I mean, grief is already lonely, but I was alone in my flat in England by the Thames, and it was just so sad, and it felt like my world was falling apart, my inner world, and then the whole world was crumbling as well. and it felt extremely unstable and very disturbing. And so that's when I really started to dive into the science, because strangely enough, science gave me stability. I started to be almost obsessed with the data, the figures, the numbers, the graphs, the stats. And I was holding on to this in that very uncertain period. And what it did was quite revealing. It helped me in two main ways. The first one was that suddenly, by reading the science, I could make sense of my own experience. Suddenly, I realized that all these things that I thought were odd, were off, were not quite right in the way I reacted to grief or in the way I held it. I realized that actually it's normal. Like my brain and my body are responding in the way they are meant to. There is nothing wrong with me. So that was the first big revelation. And the other thing that all these studies and research showed me is that even though grief is a very personal experience, it's universal. We all go through it. We will all be faced with loss at some point in our lives. And this was helpful in that it reconnected me to our shared humanity. You know, that notion of we're all in this, and that pain that feels unbearable, that pain that feels like no one can get it, actually, probably 8 out of 10 people in the room can get it. So these are the two things really that science helped me with. And then I was doing therapy, and my therapist said to me one day that I needed to really work in grief. And my first reaction was, absolutely not. Like, I have enough, I don't want to handle other people's grief. I can't. And she was a Christian, and she smiled kindly and she said, I hear you, and I understand you, but I also think that it's good that you look after yourself, but you've experienced grief more than the average. You're still able to love life, to love people. I think it's your mission, it's your duty to share it. You cannot keep that to yourself. And I was almost a bit offended. I thought, oh, she's a bit, daring to say that. But then within 20 minutes, I knew that she was right. I walked home that day and I was like, of course she's right.
That
And
gave
that's
me
been
chills, Sylvia.
yeah,
That gave me
yeah,
chills hearing her
it,
say that. Wow.
yeah. And she was really sweet because she would smile and she said, it's not my place to say that. Like, I shouldn't be saying that as your therapist. But I think, she was like, God's message is very clear. You have a
Mm,
mission. Well, I think she's right. Yeah.
that's powerful. That's powerful. And I think that's a beautiful point to know why you're on this planet. That's beautiful. I love how you talked about the different pieces. Again, I'm so sorry for all of the losses that you've had to experience, but I love how you're using it to help other people to find ways to heal. I love how you talked about how grief is universal and then normalizing, because I think that's the other thing, because everybody experiences grief differently. And so some people may pour themselves into work, or somebody may pour themselves into creating a nonprofit, like however you, or they may just go into silent mode and just like withdraw. Like everybody processes and experiences and grief differently. And so I love that you said, like, however you lean into grief, like that's your journey. So nothing is wrong with me. Love that. Nothing is wrong with me. And so I hope people take that away as we talk about today's topic of grief and loss, because that is very hard to talk about. Is there not, I think it's really hard to compare, but I didn't know if, based on all the different losses that you had, if one was harder than the other, maybe because of timing or maybe because of the relationship. Was there one loss that was harder for you to process?
I would say there was one that was less difficult for me to process, and it was my mom's, because when she passed more recently, she was unwell, and it was expected, and we were given the privilege of having all these conversations, talk
Mm,
about it, hold hands and say I love you, and just like and she would say, I'm ready to go. I've had a good life. I just want to see my husband and my sons again. I want to be with them, and so it was a different type of pain because I miss her and I loved her dearly, but there was not that extra layer of grief that I had for my dad's and my brother's lives that they didn't get to live. My
mm,
older brother was a dad, my younger brother was a teenager, And there was that extra grief of, well, they wanted to live. They were young, they were full of energy, they wanted to live. And that was, so yeah, that would be the difference maybe. Whereas my mom, she was ready, and it made it in the long term, it made the grieving process easier for me, having had these conversations with her.
Because you had the time to prepare mentally and spend time
Yes, and
with her.
also because she was at peace. I think she really
Mm,
gave me a beautiful present by really saying it, by really saying, I'm ready. I'm grateful for the life I had, but now I'm tired. I'm ready to go. And so for me, there's not that sense of injustice. Like, why did she didn't want to go? No, she was fine. She was at peace with that. So that was helpful for my own grieving process.
yeah, so that leads me into my next thought about unattended grief. Like, what does that look like? Can you break that down for us?
Yes, and this is such an important topic for me because I think one of the first issues really is that we might not even realize the state we're in. Like, I did not realize it really had to come to the accident of my older brother for me to be like, whoa, hang on a sec. What did just happen over these 20, 25 years? How did I miss out on so much without even realizing? And the thing is, for me at least, I had capitulated. I thought, well, when you lose the people you love the most, that is just how you go through life. You're easily triggered by songs, but it just jumps at you out of nowhere. You carry that sadness with you. There's like there's like a constant fatigue almost. There's a it's just like and physically as well. Like your digestive system might be disrupted, your sleep, your capacity to focus, all these little things that are just so routine then that it becomes the norm. You're like, well, that's just, I've lost the people I love the most. That's just how it is. And I think the thing that I suffered the most from was triggers. I was very easily triggered for many, many years and very brutally triggered. And then the other thing after my older brother died, it was my reduced capacity. I was exhausted physically and I didn't understand what was going on. So that physical fatigue as well. And now I know that there are ways, to go through grief, to carry it, to learn to carry it, that don't require that extra layer of pain and heaviness, so that we don't miss out on the life that is happening around us. I think this is really the most important message I want to give, is that it's important that we find the balance between acknowledging our grief because it's here, it's painful, it's difficult, and it will always be here, but also learning to process it in a way that we don't miss out on what is still going on around us, the life that is still going on, the people that are here, that love us, that deserve to be loved by us, that deserve to be seen, and all the things that can still bring us joy. So really, we can carry grief and joy hand in hand, and we don't need to miss out on the happy moments. And that's a risk, I think, when we don't realize we have unattended grief, we risk missing out on those who are still here.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Grief and joy can coexist. That's beautiful. You talked about grief triggers. Can you break that down too? Like, what is grief triggers? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so for anyone who has lost a loved one in the audience, they will understand when I say you walk into a cafe and then suddenly your person's favorite song plays in the speakers, and that's it, right? You're just gone, and it's so powerful. It feels like you can't do anything about it. They're just like dictators in your life. They just show up randomly, and in the grocery store, you go shopping for the grocery store, and then you see a packet of biscuits that you used to share when you were kids, and it's like these are grief triggers, and they're very, very powerful. And it's because we have a map. Our brain maps our relationships with different on different levels, and this is something that helped me a lot to understand that these triggers were actually completely explicable, and also there is a way, to learn to handle them, to not be a victim of them. So what happens in the brain that I discovered in the work of Mary Frances O'Connor and her beautiful book, The Grieving Brain, she explained, she's a neuroscientist who has studied grief 25, 30 years now. And she explained that we have a three-dimensional map of our loved ones. And the three dimensions are time, space, and connection. So if I ask you where your parents or your partner or your children are, you will be very likely to answer the question, to tell me, oh, well, they're here. And if I ask you when you're going to see them again, you'll also be quite likely to answer with precision when you will see them again, when your next interaction will be and where it will be. And if I ask you how close you are, you can tell me I'm super close, or that's just the barista, quite friendly, but not my bestie. And so when the person we love dies, that map isn't updated immediately. And there is that dissonance, that mismatch between the map of our brain and the reality. So when a song comes up, there's that thought of, oh, they're still here, and then there's the reality kicking in, oh no, they're gone. And it's that mismatch between the map in the brain and the reality that is so painful. And that takes time to, basically, the brain needs to recalibrate and to learn that the dimensions of space and time are no longer valid in this physical world. But the good thing, the good news is that the connection, on the other hand, is still there, and this will never disappear. The connection and the love and the relationship will always be there, and it's quite organic as well. It keeps growing. It's not stagnant. It doesn't remain where it was when the person died. It is very, very much alive. So yes, so that was super helpful to understand the mechanisms of the brain, and that there are ways through repetition and exposure for us to learn that. If I give you a quick example of someone who loses their spouse, they will wake up in the morning and not having them next to them in the bed will be very sad, and it will take many mornings, many months before the brain understands that this is the new reality. And then the trigger will soften through exposure and repetition of that new reality that the brain didn't choose and struggles to adapt to.
And that was going to be my next question of like, how do you learn to live with the triggers? You can never avoid all the triggers because there are people, places, and things like we're always going to be triggered. But how can you, as you say, soften those? So exposure, is there other ways that you can soften and be more present?
Yeah, well, there's something that has helped me a lot and that I use a lot with clients. And it sounds surprising sometimes, but it's hugely effective. So, when one of these grief waves is about to hit, we know it. We're so familiar with them. We can feel them creeping up. And so, what I would do would be to say to that grief wave, I see you. I understand that you're here, but not now. Now is not the right time. I don't have time for you now. But I make sure I attend to it later. And that's really the key point. And when I say that, I'm being super serious. I mean that I'm going to put it in my diary. I'm going to make an appointment with myself. And I'm going to say Thursday night, 8 p.m. I'll put the candles out, the sad music, the tissues. I'll cry my eyes out, watch pictures and videos. And I will let that grief wave go through me in all its heaviness and ugliness. But that's the really important point. And so, just like going to the gym, if you go 1 day or 2 days, you're not going to see the difference. Even if you go for 1 week every day, you're not going to see the difference. But you know that if you go regularly over a certain period of time, you're going to start to feel stronger, more energetic. And so it's exactly the same with this. It's not going to work the first time or the second time, or maybe even the sixth or seventh time. But if you keep doing it, there will be a point where you have a feeling of control a little bit again, where you can say, no, not now, not now. But it's really key to tend to it at some point. You cannot just ignore it because this will backfire really painfully. And then, there comes, there's like a bittersweetness that comes to these appointments with yourself where you really let grief in and then you let it out again so that joy can, take its place. So it's
That's
very
good.
pragmatic,
That
but
is
it's
good,
it's helpful.
Sylvia. Yeah, I like that. For clients, I have them do a grief timer. So kind of exactly what you said, but I have them set a timer. So that way, because sometimes people are like, I can't fall up, I can't cry because I'll fall apart and I won't be able to put myself back together. My kids need me. This person needs me. My job needs me. Like I gotta stay all put together. And so they stuff their feelings. And so I tell them set a timer once a week, once a day, like however frequently that you need it, Like if you do it more, then you won't need it as you go. But yeah, set a timer for 5 minutes, set a timer for 10 minutes. So that way you can just literally just be present for your loved one, for the grief, for the heaviness. I love what you talked about, the exchange, letting the grief out so the joy can come in. I love
Yeah.
that. I love
Yeah,
that.
it's actually an analogy of a friend of mine, Maria Lessi. She also works in the grief space. Her husband died suddenly, mom of two kids. And she said that to me, and I just love the analogy. She said, grief to me was like a guest who had overstayed a welcome. And
Mm,
there was a time where I thought, okay, that's enough now. I want joy to move back in. So you can be a regular guest, grief. You can come, you can come by. You will always be part of the family, but you've been here 24/7 long enough now. I want joy to move back in. And I just thought this is such a lovely analogy. I love that.
heck yeah. Heck yeah. Thank you for sharing that story. That's sweet. So, I guess one other thought before we start to wrap up. What do you wish people knew when you think about living with long term grief? What do you wish people knew?
Well, the one advice I would give to anyone struggling, again, it's super pragmatic, it's actionable, is to, when emotions are too heavy, when it's too hard to face, when it's too overwhelming, start with your body. Come home to your vessel. Start with your body and look after your body in the most basic ways. Hydrate, eat real food, get sunlight, try to have a bedtime routine, and surround yourself with people who nourish you and not those who drain you. So look after your body and you will do yourself a big favor, because if the body is looked after, it'll take the edge off of certain really heavy emotions. And once the body feels better, then we can tend to the more emotional work.
That's good. Some definitely very practical things to do. Looking after the body.
Mm.
That's good.
Simple, but yeah. There's something, I don't know if you've heard of a scientist called Lisa Feldman Barrett. She specialized in emotions and she talks about the body budget. And she says that we have a budget, and when the body budget is depleted, it affects our emotions quite negatively. So sometimes we might feel sad, but we're actually just dehydrated. So grief is a different story than just being sad, but it's just to say that if you look after the body, you're going to take a bit of the edge off.
That's good. That's sweet. As we wrap up, what are some words of wisdom that you want listeners to walk away with? Maybe it's words of wisdom, maybe it's action steps. You've already given some great practical ways, but yeah, what are some ways that you want listeners to walk away with?
Yeah, I found throughout my life that grief was the greatest teacher. It was the toughest teacher, but it has taught me the best lessons. And grief has been a portal, and it has opened doors and dimensions of pain that I didn't know existed, that I didn't know I could survive. But in the same way, it has opened dimensions of joy and gratitude and appreciation and, presence. So, yeah, if you're listening to this and you're in the depth of your grief, hold on. There is hope and there is light on the other side.
Ooh, that's so sweet. Hold on. There's hope and light on the other side.
Mm.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Good words of wisdom. Well, Sylvia, it's been an honor just hearing your heart. It's been an honor hearing your story. It's been an honor hearing just some practical ways that listeners can learn to just live through grief and not just grin and bear it and just like grin and smile at work, but then go home and then they're so like cast down in their spirit and their mind and their body. And so I love that you've given some great words of wisdom and even neuroscience ways. I'm a neuroscience geek, so I love all of that. But but yeah, so thank you so much, Sylvia.
Thank you so much, Rita, for having me. It was a real pleasure to talk to you. Thank you.
Absolutely. So Sylvia, how can listeners, if they want to go deeper with leaning into grief, understanding grief, maybe they want to be like you and be a grief counselor, like how can they connect with you? What are ways that you best serve them?
Mm. Yeah, so you'll find all the information on my website, which is my name, sylviawolfer.com. And I have a lot of free resources because sometimes people just need to approach things in their own time. at their own pace. And I have a lot of articles on my website that I've written, a lot of podcasts where I've been a guest on, but also podcasts that I record about the science of grief. So there's a lot of free resources. There are some online digital courses as well, and then the possibility to reach out to me one-to-ones. And I also run retreats online and in person every now and then.
Awesome, awesome. So many, many ways that you can be connected with grief. Okay. Sweet. Yeah, I love all those options. So one-on-ones, retreats, articles, podcasts. Sweet.
Yes, I really
Sweet.
want to make sure that everyone can have access to this because, to the knowledge, to the science digested so that it is accessible, because it has made a huge difference for me. It really took away that layer of questioning myself, like, is something wrong with me? Is something off? Like, should I be handling this differently? Should I be feeling this differently? So there's a lot of information and practical tools about managing your sleep, regulating your appetite, what happens in the brain, what happens in the body, what happens in family constellations, how to talk to someone who's just lost a loved one. There's a lot. I love writing and I can't stop. So there's a lot of articles on my website.
Awesome, awesome. Well, cool. Thank you again so much, Sylvia. I definitely appreciate it. I will have the links to your website also in the show notes so everyone can connect with you as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rita.
Awesome. All right, guys, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for stopping by the Darren Will podcast. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe wherever you hear this episode. Wishing you a fabulous day, my dear. Until next time, keep loving, keep living, and keep daring well. Take care, guys. God bless.